TCU lands 2 more commits for the 2026 class on Monday. They are making pass rushers a priority.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox, brought to you by FanDuel today. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. Thank you for joining the show. TCU, the coaching staff, they are hitting the trail hard on the 2026 class. So transfer portal window, the first one closed. Frogs added some big-time players. Now, if you follow the team on social media or follow the coaches on social media, you've seen over the last few weeks a lot of pictures of guys at local high schools visiting a bunch of different kids. And then they held their junior day this weekend where they had a bunch of their top 2026 targets on campus, opportunity to stand in there, see what TCU has to offer. So the first domino to fall was Jesse Ford, who was a 4-star prospect, is a 4-star prospect currently, defensive end at Arlington Martin, good player, one of the best edge rushers, defensive end prospects in the state of Texas. So that was a big get. And then today, the Frogs landed 2 more defensive line prospects, Carter Buck, who is an edge rusher from Lake Travis, and then Duncan McGee, who is a defensive lineman from Texas High in Texarkana. So we'll start with Carter Buck, who is a 3-star prospect according to 247 Sports. He had offers from Kansas, Arizona, North Texas, Tulsa, and others. 6'5", 240. And the interesting thing when you turn on his film, I'll be curious to see where he ends up when he gets on campus and sort of how TCU sees him as a defensive player. Because with the Andy Avalos defense, you've got your stud linebacker spot now, which is a true stand-up pass rusher, like an outside linebacker essentially. And then you also have defensive ends who are in 5 technique, 3 technique, outside shoulder of the tackle, outside shoulder of the guard, and they're trying to get upfield and make plays and be pass rushers as well. With Buck, you see at Lake Travis, he's moved all around the formation. He's been in the more traditional like stand-up edge rusher role where he's in that 2-point stance, looking to get off the ball immediately and use his speed and athleticism. But you also, there are times where you see him in kind of a 4-point stance in more run-oriented situations where they slot him inside. And he does a really good job of being violent with his hands. There are multiple clips on that highlight reel where he would just stand an offensive lineman up and basically throw him, to the side. And there were also times where he'd bull rush from the edge where he used that speed and athleticism to just beat the tackle to his spot and get to the edge and dip underneath before he was able to move his feet. So a lot to like about Carter Buck, and was super productive player at Lake Travis this past year. He collected 80 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. So shows a lot of promise as a dude who can blow plays up, make things happen behind the line of scrimmage, and also get to the quarterback and get sacks. And when you watch him play, one thing that I noticed about the 2024 class, whether it was Chad Woodfork or Keelan Abrams, even a guy like Dylan Arkansas to a certain extent, even though he'll be inside, and John Schobel is another edge rusher. With all those guys, there were so many plays where the athleticism would just pop off the screen. And if offenses were trying to run some sort of slow developing zone read, mesh concept, RPO, dudes were in the backfield before it even started, and they were just blowing up the play. And you see that with Carter Buck too, that ability at the point of attack. If you're going to try to read him and not block him, that's a bad decision because he's just going to attack, and he's so quick and so fast off the ball that he can blow that play up before it even really starts. Also saw a lot of good pursuit at times where, he was blocked and he was able to just get off his blocker, run somebody down, chase somebody down from the other side of the field. So all of that's a big plus. So Jamarcus McFarland, Andy Avalos, they are making it very clear early in this recruiting process they want big-time defensive linemen. And if you're going to have a good defense, the reason this excites me, Sonny Dykes has never really had good to great defenses in his career. They've always been below average or passable, right? If you're going to be a really good defense, it starts with a pass rush. Andy Avalos is going to blitz too, and there's a lot of creative things that you can do with bringing pressure and changing up your looks, and all that's wonderful. But if you can get consistent pressure with your 4 or 5 guys that you're bringing in your base fronts, there's nothing that helps a defense more. It helps your secondary, it helps your linebackers. Everything will feed off of it. And if you have a quarterback who is uncomfortable every time he drops back to pass, that's a huge deal. So Jesse Ford, more of your prototypical hand-in-the-ground defensive end. And then Carter Buck, we'll see. I mean, I think there's an ability to see where he fits best. I'm sure they'll also watch really closely what he does the senior year like Travis. And again, I love that they're going and getting guys like Travis is one of the best programs in the state. You go get somebody from that program who has been super productive and has put up a lot of great numbers through the years. That's a huge plus. The other commitment that they landed today from Duncan McGee, who's going to Texas High and Texarkana, 6'4", 265 pounds. Now, he is currently not ranked by 247 Sports or in the 247 Sports composite ranking, which factors in all the different recruiting sites. Don't be alarmed, though, because we're still early in the process of 2026. But also, if you look at his offer list, Baylor, SMU, Texas Tech, UTSA. Dave Aranda, that coaching staff, they want big-time defensive players. They know how to scout defensive linemen, as much as I hate to say it. SMU has done a really good job on the defensive side of the ball the last few years. So this is a player that's getting attention from other schools. Again, super productive junior year. Sometimes you see guys that you're sort of banking on potential. That's not the case here. Had 4 sacks this past season, 15 tackles for loss, 73 tackles total. Watching his tape, Duncan, I think, is also a dude with position flex, but he might slide inside or he could be a defensive end as well. Really good size. 6'4", 265 pounds. So you're talking about someone who's already built like a power 4 defensive lineman in a lot of ways. Took on a lot of double teams and did a nice job holding his own, or in some cases splitting the double team, making plays. Strong, physical. Another player who was able to get off the ball at the point of attack and make things happen. Multiple times where you saw in the run game, offensive lineman trying to get that helmet to his outside shoulder and hook him, and he would just fight across it, make the tackle. There were times where he would sort of get stood up, and I wouldn't say he was getting driven off the ball, but there were tackles in his highlight reel where he sort of had a stalemate at the line and got stood up, but he seemed to have a good feel for when to spin off somebody and make a play. Now, that's not what you really – I mean, in an ideal world, you want your defensive lineman getting behind the line of scrimmage, making things happen. But he did have a knack for knowing where the ball was, knowing where it was going, and sort of, even if he didn't get leverage immediately, being able to work his way, spin off the offensive lineman, and make plays and make tackles. So 2 really good prospects here. And, again, very early in this 2026 class, but I like what this coaching staff is doing. I love what they've done over the past couple cycles. At the end of the day, you got to develop the players. So it remains to be seen how successful it's going to be. But a big-time emphasis on offensive linemen, a big emphasis right now on defensive linemen and edge rushers and guys that fit what Andy Avalos wants to do defensively. I think quietly TCU's defense in the last half of the season was really good. It still had some hiccups here and there, but you started to see like, okay, this is what they're trying to build. This is what they're trying to be about. This is what their identity is. And so that was encouraging. And now you got to go get the personnel that can complement what you want to do So if you can have defensive linemen who reestablish the line of scrimmage, cause havoc in the backfield, get to the quarterback, then that's a big plus. When we come back, I talked about Gary Patterson potentially coming back to TCU yesterday. A lot of you had thoughts about it. We'll get into that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Shout out to our friends at FanDuel. It's where the game starts. You can go to FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Listen to this. New customers, $5 bet. You win that bet, you get up to $300 in bonus bets. That's right. If you win your first bet, that's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel app is easy to navigate. They have a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. You get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winning. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. FanDuel is where the game starts. So on yesterday's show, if you missed it, if you want to go back and listen to Monday's program, I talked about Gary Patterson. He did an interview with Matt Mosley on Friday. And Matt asked him specifically, hey, would you be interested in coming back to TCU and doing something with the Frogs? And he said, almost immediately, he said, I'm going to end up back there one day. He didn't specify what it was going to look like, what his role would be, but he talked about how Fort Worth is his home, TCU is his home, and he knows one day he'll end up coming back, even with some of the different places that he stopped after his career at TCU and potentially where he could help moving forward. That's always going to be the place where he'll come back to at the end of it. And so I proposed the idea, why not bring him on board? Not in a coaching role, because I know that's complicated for a number of reasons, but he would be the perfect person to drum up support from the donor base, from a fundraising perspective. These people love Gary. They have good relationships with him. He talked about how, in that interview, he talked about how he loves playing golf and he likes all the free time he has now and the freedom he has to work with his foundation and kind of do what he wants to do after working so hard for such a long time. And so that would seem to be the perfect world of you could still do a lot of those things, but you could do it with more of a purpose and with more of kind of a locked-in attitude with the idea of, hey, let's do it with the goal of building something here at TCU from a donation standpoint, whether that's the revenue sharing, NIL, or facility upgrades. And not surprisingly, a lot of you had thoughts about what that would look like. Ron said that would be excellent to bring Gary back on in fundraising. Connor said it would be hard to see Patterson under Dykes. Doubt it would happen. I wish it would be Dykes' offense and GP's defense. Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I don't think the coaching aspect of this is plausible or it would make sense. But I feel like if you had him in a fundraising role, then it would allow him to still be involved and it wouldn't make things complicated for anyone else. Landman said he wants Gary Patterson to be the GM of TCU football. And I saw a couple other people say that. I mean, I wouldn't be against it. I think he's great at scouting. And so if that was something that they wanted to allow him to do, I feel like he could thrive in it. But I just don't think he wants to deal with NIL. And even though it's going to get hopefully more streamlined and there'll be better barriers and more clear guidelines with revenue sharing, just from what I know about him and what he thinks about the current era of college football, I don't think that's something that he wants to deal with. But it's an interesting idea. Off Track says on paper this looks amazing, but there's a certain amount of humbleness that would have to be presented. Too many alphas at the top wanting credit would be difficult to navigate. So I get that. I mean, maybe this is naive on my part. I just feel like if he was in the fundraising wing of things, there wouldn't really be a need to navigate those ego issues because he wouldn't really have a ton of interaction with the staff. I mean, it would be more like, hey, we want you to just go do this. And I think there would be enough separation there that it wouldn't make it a complicated dynamic. I could be underselling that. I guess I'm not thinking about him being in the room on a daily basis, whether that's a meeting room just in general or in the defensive meeting room. He would be kind of in his own wing of what this would look like. So I don't think that would be a huge deal. And then multiple people also mentioned the possibility of him coming back and how he should have never been let go. I don't really want to rehash that. It was time to move on. It just was. It was unfortunate how it ended. I talked about that yesterday. Like, you would love for these things to be like a Disney movie where the coach realizes it's time to go and they win the last game and he rides off in the sunset on the team's shoulders. That's ideally what we all want. That's not how these things work. And in this case, it wasn't how it shook out. It was kind of ugly, and it's unfortunate that happened, but that's just sports sometimes. And I'm pleasantly surprised that nobody brought up the fact of, like, why would we want him back when he's gone other places? He coached at Texas, right? He coached at Baylor. TCU's two biggest rivals. And at the time, yeah, those moves felt personal. I mean, I know he'll play it off as like, well, these are just the people that offered me opportunities. Steve Sarkisian said, hey, I want you to be a part of this. Dave Aranda has a ton of respect for me and the way I run a defense and wanted me to be part of that program. But it also felt like a shot in the way of, hey, I still got something here. You guys made a mistake, and I'm going to show you what I can still do. And even as an analyst, just because of who Gary was and what he's done through his career, people were very interested in what he was doing and how he was going about it. And at Texas, you got a lot of credit for that defensive turnaround and sort of getting the ball rolling and then being an elite program on that side of the ball again. But I feel like you could quickly bury that hatchet and just be like, look, these things happen. You went your separate ways. You proved your point. Now let's all come together and make this work. And really, to me, the biggest advantage of it would be the factor of him just being able to unite the donor base and say, hey, if you guys got issues with how this ended, I understand it. I appreciate your loyalty. I appreciate that you're looking out for me, but I'm here now and I'm ready to help. So don't worry about that anymore. And let's just work together to make this thing happen. Right. So it's something to consider. I don't know how realistic it is, but I was actually talking to someone, a parent of a player on the team currently today. And he heard my first segment yesterday, and I was like, look, I don't know a lot about Gary because we didn't really meet him. But he reached out to me and my son when we committed to TCU and was just super excited and very complimentary. And you could tell, like, he still cares about the program. And he said in that interview, he was like, look, I didn't build this thing to watch it fall. And I don't think he meant that in like a snarky way. I don't think it was a shot at the current staff. I feel like it was just kind of a matter of fact, like, hey, I put a lot of work into this. This still means a lot to me. And I want to see it be successful. Like, I want TCU football to live up to the expectations that I set. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, he did. He set a high bar for what TCU football is and what it's supposed to be. And that's ultimately, why they decided to move on, because he did such a great job that when things started to go downhill, it was obvious and it was noticeable. But I feel like when the new athletic director, Mike Buddy, it's a time where it would make sense to say, you know what? I don't know these people really well. These people I'm going to start, knocking on doors and making phone calls and asking for help. You do. Like, you have a great feel for all the dynamics at play, who these people are. And so let's work together to make this happen, right? Like, that makes all the sense in the world. And I hope TCU would consider it. I don't know how likely it is, but I've just been thinking about it really all weekend since I heard that interview of, wow, he wants to come back. I didn't know where his headspace would be. I wasn't sure, like, if he had considered that. But he very quickly was like, yeah, I'm going to end up there one day. When we come back, we'll talk some hoops. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. AFC and NFC championship games happening this weekend. This message is brought to you by Prizepicks. It's a place to get real money in sports action. They have over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Right now, it's playoff time. There's no better way to get involved in the action than Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players. And if your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just making a few simple picks. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing one $5 lineup. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. So the TCU women, they're undefeated in conference play. They're 7-0, coming off a win against Utah. Another impressive victory. Once again, it just sort of I don't know what happens to this team in the second half. They played lights out in the first half of that ball game. And it looks like they're going to run away with it. But they just have a tendency to allow teams back into the game. And that lead got cut to like 5 in the fourth quarter when the Frogs led by as much as 21 at one point. But they found a way. They're in the middle of a gauntlet. It really started with that Utah game. Utah was ranked coming into it, but they play Oklahoma State on tomorrow night, who's also ranked. Then Baylor, who's number 25 in the country. Now, they lost to UCLA, who's the number 1 team in the country this afternoon. And then Iowa State and then Kansas State. So we're going to find out how much of a real contender this group is over the next 4 ball games. And honestly, they haven't faced a ton of adversity this year. I mean, the loss to South Carolina, which, I mean, they looked outclassed that night, but a lot of teams do against South Carolina. You know, they beat Notre Dame, they beat NC State, they've taken down Utah. So every big test, with the exception of that South Carolina game, they've passed so far. That being said, the schedule ramps up here, and I think the idea of not only playing good teams, but playing good teams back to back to back. So you play Wednesday, you turn around again and play on Sunday. There's a personal aspect to that Baylor game. Like Nikki Collin took some issue with some things Sedona Prince said before the game last year, and then Baylor won pretty convincingly, and they made it known that they won pretty convincingly after the ball game. So I kind of wonder where their headspace is there. That'll be a home game on Sunday, but going on the road to Stillwater Wednesday, Frogs trying to get it done. On the men's side, big time upset win on Sunday afternoon against Baylor. And I thought they played with great effort, great intensity. Ernest Uday was fantastic. I saw Fran Fraschilla, who I guess will be on the call that Kansas game Wednesday. He was down at practice today, and he mentioned that Ernest Uday won the Big Tough Frog Award, which they track like basically hustle plays, charges, deflections. And Ernest was great on defense. He had multiple blocks. I think they said he had 5 deflections that ball game. Just made play after play. So that's really good to see. And, I mean, if he's a difference maker, especially on offense, it really does change the way this team plays. Noah Reynolds was very solid. And then Brendan Wenzel hits that huge 3 with just a few seconds left to win the ball game. They get Kansas this week at home. Should be a really good atmosphere. I said yesterday, I didn't really feel like I was impressed with the victory. I was obviously really happy that they got it done. They killed Baylor on the boards, and they played with outstanding effort and intensity. It didn't really change a whole lot about what I thought about this team as a whole, but I was impressed that they got off the mat so well after losing to Utah. Like, you could tell they took that loss personally, and I think the coaching staff made it clear, like, hey, we have to respond. Also, Jamie mentioned in the post-game press conference that the team was dealing with the flu before the Utah game, and Ernest specifically was under the weather, but they also had other guys who were just out, and they couldn't practice as normal. I don't want to make that an excuse, but it does kind of explain, to a certain extent, why they were so lackadaisical in that ball game, especially early against the Utah team that it felt like they should have taken care of business against. But really big statement victory in Waco over the weekend. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll keep talking TCU football and basketball. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.